So I told you this story, right? That if you have a great idea and you work hard enough, you can build a billion-dollar company. That tech is this great equalizer that can just leapfrog all the problems of underdevelopment, right? That your brilliant world-changing concept is all you need, right? We have talked about this before on the podcast. It turns out that that's not the whole story, especially in developing economy. In a lot of the world, the game is rigged against you before even you start, and it's not your. And if it's not that your business plan is wrong. It's the ground that you're trying to build on. Globally, the startup rate is about the startup failure is about 90%. And that's a huge number. But in developing countries, that number isn't just about bad luck or a product nobody wanted. It's a graveyard. And it's filled with brilliant ideas from really talented founders who just got taken down by forces they couldn't even see, let alone fight. Right? And this episode isn't a eulogy for those companies. It's more of a reckoning. This isn't about bad ideas, but more about exploring those hidden traps in the infrastructure, those invisible mazes of rules that seem almost designed to bleed you out, to bleed you dry. And as I continue to build my company for the African market, I just went digging in this startup graveyard. And what I found is the real story of why so many startups in many developing countries are set up for fail before they even get off the ground. So the first thing is, the first great wall here is the regulatory maze. Okay, so every founder knows that there's going to be paperwork, correct? But in a lot of developing economies, it's not just paperwork, it's a labyrinth. It's this deliberately complicated and sometimes contradictory and not just crushingly expensive system of rules. And it's like the first big filter, and it weeds out anyone who doesn't have deep pockets or the right connections. This isn't just a red tape, it's a weapon. And in the space like fintech, which has this huge promise to democratize finance, this weapon is especially lethal. Now, to really get this concept, to really get what I'm saying, we have to look at the story of Nigeria's open banking pioneers. The dream was simple for these guys, but it was revolutionary. Create the Plaid of Africa. Now, Plaid is this American company that built the system that lets all of your different financial apps talk to each other. It's the invisible engine behind a huge part of the modern financial world. And a bunch of really ambitious Nigeria startups like, now I'm not so sure if it's Deepa or The Peer, and Okra, so that the same could be replicated for Africa. Their whole vision was to just build the infrastructure that would connect millions of bank accounts to all these new digital services. And their rise was meteoric because investors totally got the vision, and Okra, for example, which started in 2019, raised almost $1 million of pre-seed round, then a $3.5 million seed round. They were building the rails of Africa's financial future. They were enabling everything. They were on the covers of tech journals, and the dream was working. The tech was solid, the market was hungry. And then they hit the wall. The reckoning of these companies wasn't one big thing. It was more like death by 1,000 cuts, like little by little. Because why do I say this? It's because they were coming from this slow grinding machine of bureaucracy. Now, their whole business depended on this thing called an open banking framework. Basically, a set of rules that would force the big traditional banks to open up their data, so startups like Okra and here let's call it the Peer or Vipa could plug in the government. And the Central Bank of Nigeria had been promising this challenge for years. It was always just around the corner, but now let me tell you, in a bureaucratic maze such as, just around the corner can actually mean eternity. So as these startups now, Okra and Deepa, we are burning through their VC money, hiring engineers, building their products, all waiting for these new rules. That the goalposts just kept moving ahead. They kept going and going farther. The enforcement of Nigeria's open banking framework got pushed back again and again. All of a sudden, their tech was a solution for a market that didn't technically exist yet. They were forced to even negotiate with each bank one by one, which is a painfully slow and expensive process that just completely undermined their whole idea of a single open network. And the problem is deeper actually than just delays, because in many of these countries, regulations aren't just slow. They can feel like they're being used as weapons. A report that came out in 2025 showed that Nigeria's fintech sector took this incredible downturn because government policies kept shifting. One day they will suddenly ban cryptocurrency trading, the next they will hit companies with massive unexpected fines, and then fintechs like OPay and MoneyPay actually got slammed with these huge penalties. Just a stark reminder that the rules can change on you overnight. Now, this creates this crippling uncertainty, like how do you build a 5-year plan when the legal basis for your company could be gone in 5 months? For Okra, the pressure just became immense, and the Nigerian naira got devalued, which even jacked up their cost for things like cloud computing. While those regulatory delays, they were choking their revenue, and then the dream started to fall apart. After this amazing start that they had, Okra quietly shut down in 2025, I think, and they returned the money that was remaining to its investors. And then Vipa went down a similar path, closing in 2024, because it was just too hard to navigate the landscape. Now, the lesson from this is kind of chilling. You can have a perfect product, an amazing team, millions in the bank, and you're still just a guest, but yet you're still just a guest in a house that you don't control. Now, this regulatory maze feels like it's designed to be a barrier where success isn't about how you innovate. It's not about how you innovate, but about whether you can afford to wait forever and absorb these crazy costs. So it's a system where startups don't fail because the idea was bad, but because they ran out of money waiting for the bureaucrats to sign up a piece of paper, I guess. And that is just the first invisible wall that you can face. The second wall is the infrastructure gap. So if you survive that regulatory maze, you face the second great filter, the physical world. Now, in Silicon Valley, in Shenzhen, in Greater Bay Area, in other parts maybe of the world, you just take a certain thing, you can take certain things for granted. For example, the power is always on, the internet is fast, the package can get from a warehouse to your doorstep in a day. In a lot of the developing world, on the other hand, those things aren't given. They are expensive, unreliable luxuries, and for any startup that has to move actual stuff or data, this infrastructure gap is like a cousin that can just swallow your business. Now, there's no better case study in this than the rise and fall of Sendi, the Kenyan logistics giant. The dream was huge and essential. Founded back in 2015, Sendi wanted to just solve one of Africa's biggest problems: moving goods. They were just building this platform to connect businesses with drivers and vehicles to make shipping reliable, simple, and transparent. It was a solution that the continent desperately needed. I mean, some estimates actually say the cost of sending goods in the market can add up to 320% to manufacturing costs in Africa, which is insane. Now, transport cost alone can cost 50 to 75% of the price you pay in a store. Now, Sendi was going to fix this. And for a while, it looked like they would do that. They raised almost 29 million by 2022 from big names like Toyota. They grew from four founders to over 300 employees. They were a poster child of this African tech, a real world solution for a real world problem. But the real world fights back. The brutal realities of operating in this low infrastructure environment just started eating away at their finances. Now, the reckoning of Sendi was this slow grinding battle against physics and economics. A logistics company actually lives and dies on its operational cost. And in Kenya, those costs were actually spiraling. Now, first, there was this problem of fuel. Constant price hikes throughout 2022 just sent Sendi's, their cost, like it went through the roof. Then there was this thing about the currency, the Kenyan currency. The Kenyan shilling got weaker. which meant actually their dollar-denominated expenses got more expensive. So this toxic mix meant that Sandy was often delivering packages at a loss. And this is where that infrastructure gap becomes a death trap. See, in a market with good roads and dense cities, you get economies of scale. You can group deliveries, optimize routes. But Africa's geography is just different, my brother. Navigating unpaved roads, insane traffic, remote villages, it's actually incredibly expensive. Now, that last mile delivery part of the journey is an operational nightmare in Africa. One analyst actually pointed out that the lack of a national address system in many of these countries is a huge problem because it forces drivers and customers to just be on the phone with each other constantly to just locate each other. And for Sandy, all of these challenges were magnified. They were burning through a reported $1 million a month. They were just bleeding cash, waiting for the market to correct itself, but it never did. The funding that had been so easy to get started drying up, and then Sandy had to make these painful cuts. In July 2022, they cut staff. In October, they had more layoffs, and they pulled out of Nigeria to save cash. It just wasn't enough. And in September 2023, after failing to find a buyer, Sandy, this logistics champion that we're talking about here, went into administration. So the lesson from all of this here is that it's kind of a hard dose of reality. A business model that looks great on a whiteboard in a Stanford classroom can completely fall apart on a potholed road in rural Kenya. The infrastructure gap isn't just an inconvenience, it actually multiplies all your costs. It makes predictable financial planning almost impossible, and that is the second invisible wall. The third wall is the market mismatch. So if a startup somehow crosses the previous two previous walls, the regulatory maze and the infrastructure gap, then there's this one last wall. And this one might be the most insidious of all. The market itself can be crazy. The startup philosophy that dominates everything born in Silicon Valley is all about bit scaling, right? Grow at cost, capture the market, and you'll figure out how to be profitable later. It's a model that assumes you have tons of venture capital and a huge consumer class with a lot of disposable income. Now, trying to apply that model directly to developing economies, right, is like trying to plant a redwood tree in a desert. The soil is just completely different, and failing to see this mismatch between the Silicon Valley playbook or the Shenzhen playbook and the reality of how people spend their money is actually the third wall that has crashed actually the most well-funded companies. Now, here comes the story of Copia Global, which is a masterclass in this. The dream was noble and it seemed brilliant. Started in 2013, Copia wanted to bring e-commerce to millions of middle and low-income families in Africa, especially in rural areas. Their model was super unique. They used their network of over 50,000 local agents, usually small shopkeepers who would take orders and handle deliveries. It was a model designed for Africa. And their rise was actually spectacular. So Copia became one of the best funded startups on the continent, raising a staggering $123 million. At their peak, they had these 1,800 employees serving millions of customers in Kenya and Uganda, and it looked like a huge success. But that growth at all cost playbook had a dark side. It needs a constant supply of fuel, which is venture capital. The reckoning for Copia then started, when the fuel line began to sputter. Now, as the global economy got a hit in 2023, investors who used to write these huge checks started asking for a clear path to profitability. And when they looked at Copia's book, the math just didn't work. So here's the core of the problem with Copia. Copia was serving low-income customers. These customers are extremely sensitive to price, and they don't have a lot of money to spend. This means that your profit margins are razor thin. So while Copia was great at getting customers, the unit economics were actually brutal. the cost of to just get a customer and deliver their order was often more than the money they made from that customer's small purchases. The company was just burning through cash at this, totally unsustainable rate. And this is the classic Silicon Valley problem, but with a crucial twist. In the US, a company like Amazon could lose money for years because investors just believe that once it owned the market, it will become profitable. But the assumption is based on, on a market with high consumer spending. While in rural Kenya, that end game was less certain. Then the wider economy hammered the financial nails, the final, the ultimate nails in the coffin. Just like with Sandy, the local currencies got weaker against the dollar, which just destroyed their finance. High cash burn plus not being able to raise new money created this death spiral. In July 2023, I think, the first big signs of trouble appeared when Copia shut down its Uganda operation, and then they decided to pivot. They tried to pivot to cut costs, but the fundamental mismatch was just too big. In May 2024, the inevitable happened. After failing to raise more cash, Copia Global's parent company announced that it was winding down. And then the Kenyan entity was placed into administration. Over 1,000 jobs, I think, were lost, were at risk, especially. And the dream crashed into hard reality to their customers because of their customers' empty pockets. The lesson from Copia is kind of a huge warning. You cannot just copy and paste a business model from a high-income country. The obsession with growth over profitability is probably a dangerous gamble when your customers are purchasing, their purchasing power is lower. And you can raise $100 million, but if every sale you make loses you money, then you're not building a business. You're actually just presiding over a very expensive bonfire. This is the third invisible wall. So what do all of these stories tell us? What connects the wreckage of a fintech pioneer, a logistic champion, and an e-commerce giant? In today's episode, they just tell us about how the playbook written in Silicon Valley or in Asia often doesn't work in the developing nations, especially, let's say, in Africa. The failure isn't the ideas, which were brilliant, but it's not the founders who were talented and driven. The real reason so many startups fail is that they are playing a game on a field full of traps. They are being forced to climb these invisible walls that are so high they are designed to make you fall. The first is the regulatory maze, where bureaucracy actually holds progress hostage. And then the second is the infrastructure gap, where the missing foundations of a modern economy make your costs balloon. And the third one is the market mismatch, where business models built for rich consumers crash into the reality of low-income environments. So these are slow, grinding systemic failures backed by the environment itself, and it's a system that ends up, filtering for people with huge amounts of cash and political access, not always the ones with the great ideas, the best ideas. But understanding these walls, I believe, if you understand these walls, is actually the first step to figuring out how to climb them, or even maybe tear them one by one. And the most important aspect is going to require you a whole new playbook, one built on being resilient, efficient with your cash, and having a deep understanding of the local reality. So I want to ask you, are these invisible walls just the cost of doing business, or can this system actually be changed? What do you think is the single biggest factor holding entrepreneurs back? Is it the regulations, the infrastructure, or the market realities? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if this actually or somehow opened your eyes to the real challenges these founders are up against, make sure to like, subscribe for more deep dives in what really takes to succeed. This is the Self-Seed Podcast, and this was just a dive on how what causes most founders for most businesses to fail, most startups to fail in the developing world. Until next Tuesday, keep growing, keep learning, and keep trying. Yeah, keep trying. Become a startup founder. Yep. See you in the next one.